Hi guys, my name is Siobhan Fallon. Welcome back. Today we're going to continue looking at the Irishmen who fought at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And as you know, many people died on the battlefield that day, but there were also quite a few survivors. So we're going to look at some eyewitness testimony and see if it helps us better understand the chaos and controversy of June 25th, 1876. Thank you so much for joining me.
My last two videos in this series covered some of the history about why there were so many Irishmen in the U.S. Army and, of course, the 7th Cavalry. One thing to keep in the back of your mind is the year 1847, or Black 47, which was the worst year of the Great Hunger in Ireland. Between 1845 and 1850, of an island of about 8 million people, 1 million men, women, and children starved, and over 1 million were forced to emigrate abroad for survival. This map shows how badly each county was hit, and the number you see in the boxes there is roughly how many 7th Cavalry soldiers came from each area. Many of these Irish immigrants came to America and found a career, or at least a chance at a new beginning, in the United States Army. The 7th Cavalry in 1876 was made up of 43 to 50% foreign-born soldiers. At least 16% of the 7th Cavalry were Irish-born. If you count those who are of Irish descent, about 1 out of every 3 members of the 7th were Irish. In my previous videos on Irish soldiers of the 7th Cavalry, we covered the overview and lead up to the fight, so please check those out. Right now, we're going to start with the 3 columns, or 4 when you factor in the pack train that followed behind. These columns approached the Little Bighorn River and the vast combined forces of the Lakota and Cheyenne who were camped there. These are the separate columns led by Custer, Reno, Benteen, and McDougall. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer had the headquarters and 5 companies. Major Marcus Reno had 3 companies plus most of the Indian scouts. Captain Frederic Benteen also had 3 companies with him, and Captain Thomas McDougall's column consisted of B Company, the security detail, and the pack train. Once more, this is how they approached the Little Bighorn River. They all set out from the divide together. Then Custer sent Benteen's column on a scout to the left. A few miles later, after Custer and Reno had been riding parallel with each other, Custer sent Reno's column first into the valley to bring the Indians to battle. Reno's understanding was that Custer would support him from the rear, and many soldiers attest to Custer, or at least officers from Custer's column, Lieutenant Cook and Captain Keogh, going as far as the river with Reno. But then, Custer's column diverged and moved up the bluffs, and eyewitnesses from Reno's column saw parts of Custer's command in the distance. Meanwhile, Reno rode down into the valley. When the warriors began to come up and meet him, Reno halted. He threw down a skirmish line, but his column was quickly pushed back into a timber, and from this timber, they retreated up toward the bluffs, which happened to be roughly the last place some soldiers from Reno's command said they had seen Custer's column. Meanwhile, Captain McDougall was following more slowly behind. He had the mules, the supplies, and all of the additional ammunition. For reference, guys, I'm going to be using the numbers from Fred Wagner's book, Participants in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. I like to have faces with names, so the next couple slides are going to show the breakdown of the columns with the officer leadership of each. Custer was called General by his contemporaries because of his Civil War service, but he was technically a Lieutenant Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer's column was made up of headquarters as well as companies C, E, F, I, and L. This was a total of about 210 men. Major Marcus Reno was the second in command that day. His column was made up of A, G, and M, as well as most of the Indian scouts, and this was about 153 men. Captain Frederic Benteen was a third in command. Benteen's column was made up of his own H Company, as well as D Company and K Company. Benteen had about 117 men. Today we'll mostly be discussing the Irish of Captain Weir's Company D. Captain Thomas McDougall led the final column. He was the B Company commander, and he commanded the pack train escort, which was the security detail made up of a handful of men from each company. McDougall was the lowest ranking captain of the 7th Cavalry of this campaign. First Lieutenant Edward Gustav Matthey was in charge of the pack train itself. Remember, there were civilian packers with the pack train as well as a couple of scouts. This column had a total of 143 men. And guys, that map by Jeff Lackey, he created it for us, and you hardly ever see the route of the pack train clarified or even mentioned, so I think it's pretty cool to have a visual of the sort of trajectory they followed. So this is the scene. We all know it did not go well for U.S. forces that day. So now let's hear a little bit from individual Irish accounts. Our last video left off here with D Company. Company D played a crucial and rather controversial role at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and Irish sergeants were there to witness it. 3 of the 4 sergeants of D Company were born in Ireland, and they were especially experienced soldiers. First Sergeant Michael Martin from Dublin, Sergeant James Flanagan from Innis in County Clare, and Sergeant Thomas Harrison from Sligo. 38% of the enlisted men in D Company were foreign-born. That's Irish, German, and other nationalities. And in the context of the other companies, that's not even the highest of foreign-born to native-born soldier ratio. D Company had been one of the companies with Captain Frederic Benteen's column, and therefore had been sent on that scout to the left before Reno's column had been sent into the valley, and before Custer took his own 5 companies and went around the bluffs. So D Company followed the green line that you can see here on Jeff Lackey's map. Then Benteen's column returned to the main trail. Seeing some commotion in the valley and directed by Reno's Indian scouts, Benteen's column met Reno's men on Reno Hill. Again, take a look at the green line there on the map. Reno's men were disorganized and demoralized after their retreat and rout from the valley, and Reno's flight is in yellow. Captain Weir of D Company with Benteen immediately set up a skirmish line when he got to Reno Hill. When Reno and Benteen did not start toward Custer, after about an hour of waiting, Captain Weir decided to do his own reconnaissance, and he rode off to where multiple witnesses heard fighting in the distance. Captain Weir's orderly and Sergeant Flanigan accompanied him. Lieutenant Edgerly, seeing his captain head out, had the rest of D Company mount up, and they followed not long after. They rode to a place now known as Weir Peaks or Weir Point, and maybe even a little farther. And you can see the path they took to Weir Point from Reno Hill, marked in blue. A friend of mine and the fellow Little Bighorn researcher, Mr. Kim Callahan, is a descendant of Sergeant James Flanagan's wife, Mary Burke. Mary's parents were born in Toome, Galway, which, if you've seen my earlier video, you'll know is also the birthplace of Captain Myles Moylan. Mary was a Civil War widow and laundress with 2 children when she met Flanagan. They married and had 3 more children together. Mary continued to be a laundress for Flanagan's D Company. Kim Callahan provided me with many of these images and newspaper clippings you're about to see. Flanagan's life seems to sum up Irish immigrant dreams of the American frontier. Sergeant James Flanagan was born in 1839 in County Clare, Ireland. He was 5 feet 10.5 inches tall with blue eyes, brown hair, and a light complexion. This photo is James Flanagan before he took off for the gold fields in the 1850s. but the gold rush must not have been profitable for him. He enlisted in 1862 with the 11th Ohio Cavalry, which was stationed along the Oregon Trail in Nebraska during the Civil War. After the war, Flanagan served with the 2nd Cavalry, and then he enlisted in the 7th Cavalry in Kentucky in 1871. There he was assigned to Thomas Weir's D Company. Flash forward to June 25, 1876. Here's an excerpt from an interview with D Company's George Willey describing D Company's arrival on Reno Hill as well as what they saw from Weir Point. Soon after Benteen joined Reno on the hill, Captain Benteen started to open up communication with Custer, and the troop marched out along the bluff until it came to a jumping-off place from which you could see down into the hollow of Medicine Tail Coulee. Men dismounted and formed a line over this hill from east to west. Seeing many horsemen over on the distant ridge with guidons flying, Captain Weir said, "That is Custer over there," and mounted up ready to go over, when Sergeant Flanagan said, "Here, Captain, you'd better take a look through the glasses. I think those are Indians." Weir did so and changed his mind about leaving. Now I want you guys to look at this image. This is the marker for Weir Point at the Little Bighorn battlefield. It's not up on the two western peaks of Weir Point or the Sugarloaf Hill beside it. This marker is road level, so cars can just pull up alongside it and read it. And I took this picture with a rather crappy cell phone, just my old Samsung, in September 2020. I'm not sure how well you can see, but even from where I was standing, I wasn't elevated, I wasn't using any kind of zoom function, I could see Last Stand Hill in the distance with the naked eye. There's some trees there by the cemetery, but on the right, where that little yellow arrow is Last Stand Hill. On June 25th, 1876, there would have been smoke and dust, of course, but anyone standing near Weir Point would have known there was a fight going on, or, according to George Willey, the end of a fight. Sergeant Flanagan was recommended for an award for conspicuous gallantry for the Little Bighorn fight by Captain Godfrey. And a year later, in 1877, Flanagan was wounded at the Battle of Snake Creek or Bear Paw against the Nez Perce. He was discharged in 1881. He became a court bailiff, and he lived in Mandan, North Dakota, which is near Fort Abraham Lincoln. Flanagan and Mary raised their children there. Flanagan died in 1921 at the age of 81. He and Mary are buried in the Catholic Cemetery in Mandan, North Dakota. The first sergeant of D Company was Michael Martin. Michael Martin was born in Dublin in 1835. He enlisted in the 7th Cavalry in 1867 and was described as having gray eyes, fair hair, fair complexion, and being 5 feet 6.5 inches tall. We don't know much about Martin's role at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. But, like Flanagan, Martin was at the Bear Paw fight in 1877. Unfortunately, Martin had survived the Battle of the Little Bighorn only to be shot in the head by the Nez Perce the very morning that Chief Joseph surrendered to Colonel Nelson Myles. You'll remember we spoke about this fight in my last video when we mentioned Sergeant George McDermott, who was also killed at Bear Paw. Michael Martin left behind a widow, Ellen, and 4 children under the age of 9. First Sergeant Michael Martin and the other 7th Cavalry dead were reinterred at the Custer Battlefield National Cemetery in 1912. I'm sure some of you recognize the gentleman in this photo there. That's my friend, the late Little Bighorn researcher Morris Knorr, and he was writing about Sergeant Thomas Harrison and D Company when he passed away last year. And Morris did some really great work, and he was just a true friend to many of us in the Little Bighorn world. I went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. at Morris's request and got to look at Thomas Harrison's military file there. It was just incredible. So right now I'm going to use some of Morris's biographical information that he dug up on Harrison, and Morris delved deeper into Harrison's life than anyone else. So some of this might be in conflict with some other historians' information, just so you know. And Kim Callahan was also a big help to Morris with his research on Harrison. Thomas Wilfred Harrison was born in 1836 in County Sligo, Ireland. He had hazel eyes, black hair, a dark complexion, and he was 5 feet 9.5 inches tall. Harrison followed the military tradition of his family, and from Belfast in Northern Ireland, Harrison enlisted in Britain's 5th Dragoons in 1854. Harrison missed the Battle of Balaclava and the charge of the Light Brigade, but he served with this later campaign for 11 months. Then he transferred to the 7th Hussars for 9 months and fought in India before being wounded in the right elbow. He was medically discharged in 1859. That's when Harrison sailed to America, landing in New York in 1860. He joined the 79th New York Infantry Highlanders and fought with them throughout the Civil War. Harrison joined the 7th Cavalry in 1866. Elizabeth Custer mentions Thomas Harrison in her memoir, Tenting on the Plains. She tells an anecdote about how Harrison once served as Custer's cook. Custer wrote a letter to Libby detailing how Harrison cooked the potatoes and onions. Custer was not impressed, writing, "We could not eat it." I'm wondering if Harrison tried to cook his commander the popular Irish dish Kilcannon, which is cabbage and onion mashed with potato. Custer, in his letter, continued, "Harrison's intentions were good, and notwithstanding the mixture of onions and potatoes, the man does very well, much better than I expected, and I know of no one in the command who lives as well as we do." Okay, back to June 25th, 1876. Sergeant Harrison was with Lieutenant Edgerly when D Company tried to go out to Custer. Captain Weir was on Weir Point, or the Sugarloaf Ridge alongside it. Perhaps after Sergeant Flanagan had alerted Weir to the fact that Custer's fight in the distance was lost. Weir motioned for Edgerly to fall back, but Edgerly continued to take shots at the Indians who were beginning to come toward Weir Point, coming from Last Stand Hill or other areas of the battlefield. And in the process, Edgerly spooked his horse. This is from Edgerly's interview with Walter Camp, quote, "Edgerly said he had trouble getting up on his horse and that there were Indians within 15 feet of him firing at him and his orderly. This was from the most advanced point. His horse kept swinging away from him, and his orderly had to ride around to that side to stop the movements of Edgerly's horse. All this time the Indians were firing at close range, and the orderly, an old veteran, kept smiling. Finally Edgerly mounted and they got out of there in a hurry. Afterward, Edgerly inquired of the orderly why he smiled, or what he saw to laugh at, and the orderly replied, the bad marksmanship of the Indians, while they were so close to them." Camp also interviewed Harrison himself, who verified that the enemy was so thick that as he and Edgerly rode away, quote, "They had to throw their bridles over their heads and draw revolvers and ride through the Indians." Edgerly twice recommended Harrison for Medal of Honor, writing, "I had considerable difficulty mounting my horse, and Sergeant Harrison, with a great danger to himself, stopped back and rode off with me in the rear of the company." It was during this retreat from Weir Point when Vincent Charlie, a D Company farrier from Switzerland, was shot through the hips. Edgerly told the injured man to hide in a ravine and that he would return with reinforcements. But Harrison said that they looked back and saw the Indians finishing off Charlie, and he was later found dead with a stick rammed down his throat. Sergeant Harrison was discharged from the Army in August 1876. Remember, he had been injured years earlier when he was in the British Army. Well, he was also hurt when he was with the 7th Cavalry. He was partially crushed while trying to get horses into a railway car. He suffered a head and chest injuries, and his hearing remained damaged for the rest of his life. After Harrison left the 7th Cavalry, he moved to Philadelphia, and he married a woman who was also Irish-born, and she was rather well off, Margaret T. Fergus. They did not have any children. Harrison worked for the Philadelphia Parks Guard Police, first as a guard and then as a sergeant. from 1876 until 1910. He patrolled Fairmount Park, which was Philadelphia's first municipal park and remains its largest park today of over 2,000 acres. Fairmount Park was the home of the 1876 Centennial Exposition, and it was also the home of one of the first zoos in the United States, the Philadelphia Zoo. It was while he was working as a guard that he revealed startling information. Supposedly, Harrison told a visiting general that he had actually been with Custer's column on June 25th, 1876, and that he'd only survived the day because he'd been sent as a messenger from Custer to Benteen. Now, we just reviewed all of this, guys. Harrison was, of course, in D Company, meaning he ought to have been with Benteen's column and with Captain Weir's company during the day. Could he have somehow been with Custer's column instead? It's hard to know if the journalist embellished the story, but Harrison is reported as saying, "I happened to be singled out by the general to gallop off to Captain Benteen with urgent orders to hurry up, and to that, as well as Benteen's subsequent request that I remain with him, I owe my escape from the wholesale carnage that followed." In August 1907, Harrison went to the 7th Cavalry reunion held in Canandaigua, New York. George Custer's widow, Elizabeth or Libby Custer, also attended this event. According to Walter Camp, Harrison went out to the Little Bighorn battlefield in 1916 for the 40th anniversary of the fight. Harrison might even be in this photo. The Little Bighorn researcher Jerry Schultz suggested that the gentleman with the number 1 over his head is Harrison. Number 3 is the 7th Cavalry soldier Peter Thompson, and that's General Godfrey of the long mustache there in the middle, number 9. The handwritten description by the photographer L.A. Huffman reads, "General Godfrey and old-timers at the monument, 1916, L.A. Huffman." A little over a year after this reunion, on Christmas Day, 1917, Thomas Wilford Harrison died. He is buried in Holy Cross Cemetery in Philadelphia.
So I have to stop with D Company today because I'm having catastrophic technology issues. I bought a new laptop in America this summer. It was amazing. It was expensive and really nice, and I had it for 3 weeks, and I almost finished this video on that new laptop, and then suddenly I got the blue screen of death, and it's not working at all. And I've spent days and days and days talking to Microsoft, Lenovo, everybody trying to fix it, and nobody knows what to do. So I'm back on my old laptop. I have to keep things short. I'm sorry. I really want to improve, and I'm trying, guys, I promise. And I want to really thank those of you who have left me the gratuities and super thanks, which was my technology fund. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I will eventually have better videos, I promise. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, watch another video if you can tolerate all of the glitches, and I hope to see you guys soon. The credits are up next. You're the best. Thank you so much for your patience. All right, guys. Bye.